Seattle Seahawks, they hire former Ravens defensive coordinator Mike McDonald. Love that hire. That was awesome. Then they go on to bring in former University of Washington and I guess you could say University of Alabama offense coordinator for about 2 seconds, Ryan Grubb. Ben, I have very little background on what to expect from Ryan Grubb and this Seahawks offense, but I do know they have some pretty good players on that roster that probably could be maximized a little more than they were last year.
Yeah, so I really like the way that Seattle has filled out their coaching staff. I think that McDonald, Alan Durde on the defensive side of the ball, and then Ryan Grubb is the offensive side of the ball is like an aggressive but understandable and I see the vision approach for how they've built out this staff. Grubb, right? OC at Washington the last couple of years. He was going to be at Alabama for a second. He was at Fresno before this. He's pretty much always been with Kalen DeBoer, who's the head coach at Seattle, now at Alabama. And offensively, like I wouldn't describe him as being any sort of like he's definitely air raid. Like it's not like that, right? Oh, the spread. Like they just do a lot of like, here's what we're good at. And last year they had 3 NFL receivers and NFL quarterbacks. So they said, hey, we're good at throwing the ball down the field, and that's how we're gonna that's how we're going to live. So there's a lot of like play action pass stuff that's in there. There's NFL concept that they borrowed. There's RPO and spread stuff that they do from the college level to kind of move the ball simply and win box count wise. So there's a lot of good intention. There's also a lot of stuff that doesn't map to the NFL. Like half of their play action concepts are like gun stuff with a pulling guard, like pass protection wise, like it's just not going to work. Like you're just not going to be able to stay back there for that long and expect to win along the offensive line and also have the routes win as typically as they do. And like, especially with like Penix's arm, like that's one of the reasons why it took so long. Penix a little bit like slower processor and like doesn't have like the biggest arm in the world. And so like with Geno, like maybe it could be faster, but like a lot of that stuff's gonna have to go under center now, right? And like NFL teams are a lot better at reading you out under center. And like if it goes under center, it's gonna need tight ends to actually excel the run fake. And like they were more of a spread team. And so Grubb, like it was very clearly a smart offense, but it is interesting because like a lot of what he did, you can't take 1-to-1 to the NFL level. You can try. I just don't think it's going to be nearly as successful. And so what you're banking on with Grubb is you're banking on smart cookie theorem. You're banking on like this guy like understands how to get football on the field. He's always done it with DeBoer, and now he's going to be doing it kind of on his own, which is interesting to me, right? There's just a level of trust, a level of, like we should do that one thing we did against Toledo in 2015. Like he doesn't have that anymore, right? And he hasn't said McDonald came from the college ranks. He was in Michigan for a year. He didn't come from the college ranks, but had the experience of saying, all right, this is what I saw college teams do. This is how I adjusted my defense to it. And then I popped back up to the league. And here's kind of here's what teams can and can't get away with. So he's been through that experience before. I think that'll help Grubb. But Grubb is a big question mark to me. It is an encouraging question mark, an optimistic question mark. But like with a guy like Zach Robinson, I feel more confident in my expectation that he's at least above average relative to Grubb, where like I can see some hightail outcomes where he's sick and they're Geno's averaging 10 air yards an attempt for the entire month of October, and DK Metcalf's running more than 6 routes, and Jackson Smith and Jigba is running more than just a screen every other play, and like they've really like opened the world up a little bit. I can also see a world where like they can't get that off the ground because like pass protection wise that they have limits, or like a legal man downfield, or like the running game, and like just like the different hashes make it harder to play spread and harder to just like do RPOs to the wide side of the field. Like there's just limits for college guys coming to the league that I think it's easy to kind of wash over with Grubb, but you have to acknowledge like that's a tough climb back up. So I got a lot to believe in, and there's talent there. Like I'm a Geno guy. I was a Jackson Smith and Jigba guy. I'm a huge Zach Charbonnet guy. Like I like a lot of their talent. I do kind of want to see and hear when we get to summer and the training camps what this offense is starting to look like and how it's coming together.
Yeah, in a weird way, Ben, it feels like I love, again, Mike McDonald. I could not speak high enough about what he did from a defensive standpoint there in Baltimore. And they had good players, stuff like that, but the way they mixed coverages up on the back end, the way they really made quarterbacks it put a lot of burden on quarterbacks from a post snap standpoint. I thought that was super impressive. That was great. But at the same time, I love that hire. It does feel like the Ryan Grubb hire is potentially, of this group we're going to talk about, maybe the one with the most variance to it.
Yeah, I mean, like I would say I don't know a lot about like Nick Holtz, who's like the new Titans OC.
Well, like sure, yeah.
Cliff, right? Like there's like I want to make it clear. I am excited about Grubb. I think of the guys they interviewed, and they interviewed a lot of good guys. Like I was interested in the Chip Kelly interview. Like I think Mike Kafka to be a good interview. Grubb is the one to me that has like the highest ceiling, because like they were doing awesome stuff at Washington, right? Just like really cool like play action concepts and downfield concepts and playing off of tendencies and calling breakers at the wrong time. And like he was a very aggressive play caller, and they would come up with like really cool short yardage stuff that would allow them to rip off easy explosives. Like Grubb clearly got it. It's just one of my big things is that getting it at the college level does not map to getting it at the NFL level, not nearly as easily as we think it does. We really want to think like, oh, if they're good at college at like calling plays and designing plays, they'll be good in the league. And it's just less true than we want it to be. We just have a lot of data that the college to NFL leap for coaches is harder than we think. And so that's where my uncertainty comes in. But if we hopped on this pod again in 9 months and we ranked the OC hires, there's a good chance, there's a better chance for a lot of guys that we would end up with Grubb at 1. And I think that's it's important to say that, and also important to throw a little bit of cold water on it.
Yeah, God. I mean, these last two teams we just talked about, Falcons and Seahawks, I was way too excited about both of these offenses last year.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can feel that excitement building up in me again. And I'm very curious where my feelings are in October on both these two teams. This